And
Okay.
the learning has been sponsored לעילוי נשמת הרב שלום דובר בן אליהו עקיבא.
Mizat Hashem. All right. So, Bezat Hashem, we are continuing the order of the Lamitet Melachot. Like I said earlier, a bunch of these halachot that are coming up are halachot that aren't so practical for our day-to-day life. These are more melachot that were for people back in the day when they would make their own garments, they would make their own clothes, they would make everything. Until we're going to get to Bezat Hashem, we're going to focus on the main melachot of today is kosher and matir, tying and untying. That's going to be the main halachot for today, Bezat Hashem. So before that, we are at the melacha right now of toveh. Okay, toveh is spinning, right? And spinning, not like turning around, but we're going to see shortly. We learned before last week. We were learning the melacha of tzoveh. Okay, dyeing. Now, after they would dye the cloth, what they would do was they would twist the fibers together, okay, and it would be done either by tool or by hand. Okay, so if someone were to do something like that, it would be asur. A common application for that today can be if a person wants to twist cotton to make a wick. Okay, the Yerushalmi brings another example where he says if we twist several threads together to make a twine. Okay, we're going to learn Bezat Hashem by Kosher that if you twist several strings together and you make a rope out of it, it can also fit sometimes under the category of kosher. Okay, so all those things would be asur to do on Shabbat. The next melacha is mesach. Mesach is threading the loom. Okay, they would have a again, I guess I don't know if you guys know this, but the way they would make the threads was they would have a loom. It's a certain contraption that you would have strings going up and down. Okay, and then they would take another string, and from the side they would uh, they would go up and down one string. Okay, it's kind of in a way it's not really knitting, because knitting you don't use a loom, but kind of the same concept where you have strings that are going up and strings that are going from side to side. Okay, so the mesach is when you're threading the loom, and then when you put the threads up, going from side to side, one up, one down. Okay, the next melacha, haoseh shnei batei nirim, is when you're, it's called setting the heddles, okay, or threading the harness. It's basically, it was like a part of the loom that would lift the threads, lift every other thread to allow the string that you're going through from side to side a lot easier. That would be also a sort of melacha. Again, these aren't things that are so relevant to us nowadays, but those are part of the lamitet melachot. The next one is oleg, weaving. Okay, so the actual act of passing the threads, the threads that go from side to side, that is going to be oleg. Okay, it doesn't have to be with a loom. It can be with anything, which means, for example, if we have a wicker chair. Okay, so the wicker chairs are based off of the concept where you have it's like kind of like a weave. It's kind of going one into the other. And if you were to try to fix something like that on Shabbat, or even if you were to try to fix a reed basket, right, where you have the same concept, that would be asur. Another practical application of something like that would be if you're trying to pull a snagged thread back into place on Shabbat. So you have a garment, a weaved garment, whatever it is, and you're pulling the garment to get a thread that was out, and you're now getting it back into shape. That would also be a sul to do because of oleg. After having done all that, the next minacha would be potzea. Potzea is detaching the cloth from the loom. Okay, so after you make the whole fabric from the loom, they would cut it off. That would be so if you're cutting the threads that hold the material in place, that is potzea. Okay, a practical application of that would be if you're removing stray threads from a garment. Okay, you have threads that are hanging loose in a garment. It bothers you. You want to pull it out. You would not be allowed to. You would not be allowed to do that. Similarly, if you were to pull out a piece of a small wad of cotton from a larger wad of cotton, that would also be problematic to do on Shabbat. So if you're using a cotton ball and you want to separate some of it, you should not do that on Shabbat. You should use the whole thing. Okay. Now, like we said, we are getting Bezat Hashem to the melacha of kosher, tying. Now, there are many, many, many things that come up with tying on Shabbat. It's important to know that from the Torah, you need two requirements in order for it to be asul. Okay, the first requirement is that it has to be kesher shel kayama, a knot that is going to last. Okay, there are two opinions to what that means. There's one opinion that says if the knot is going to last for more than 24 hours, it's asul. Okay, that's already called kesher shel kayama. And the other opinion says that it needs to last for 7 days. Anything less than 7 days is not considered kesher shel kayama. It's not considered a long-lasting knot. Okay, so that's the first requirement from the Torah, that it has to be a lasting knot. The second requirement is that it has to be ma'aseh uman. It has to be a craftsman knot, meaning a simple knot would not be considered a craftsman knot. Okay, those are the two requirements that the Torah needs in order for it to be considered a knot on Shabbat. If you have only one of the two, then it's considered to be a knot midirabanan. Okay, and we're going to see that there's a difference between a knot derabanan and a knot of deoraita. Okay, so when we try to say about we'll focus a little bit on the maaseh uman, that we say that it's a craftsman knot. So nowadays we don't have so much of that readily available, right? The meaning that the examples that the Gemara gives is kesher shel gamalim, okay, the knot that they would use to tie the camels in place, or kesher shel sapanim, the sailor's knot. Those were like special knots that they would use to hold to hold the boats in place and stuff like that. Those are knots that are called kesher shel umar. If he does only, sorry, so if he's going to be only doing the kesher shel kayama, okay, without the kesher shel uman, for example, it's if a person wants to do the example that's brought down in halacha, that if you're tying a knot on a pail, okay, to lower it, okay, to lower it to be able to bring up the water, okay, it's not a craftsman knot, okay. Therefore, it's only but it's meant to last a long time, so therefore it's only going to be isul de rabanan, okay. Okay, and the same thing we said vice versa. If you tie it only one way and not the other, sorry, if you make it only kesher shel uman without it being kesher shel kayama, first, that means you're going to undo it quickly. It's also going to be only derabanan. Now, what happens? Yes.
And if it's the Rabbanan? we can do it or we cannot.
No, we cannot do it, but we're going to see that there is a difference between a not the deoraita and the rabbanan bezat Hashem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what happens when um you change your mind sometimes? Okay, meaning you you want to make a knot, you make a knot, a regular knot, and then you change your mind and you want to leave it forever. Okay, a type of knot like this should obviously be avoided, and we'll give the example, a simple example. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. For example, tying shoelaces. Okay, sometimes when you tie your shoelace with a double knot, some people tie it with a double knot and then they undo it like right away whenever they're doing it, and then there are other people where they just like they sometimes just slip their foot out and they leave it forever. So leaving alone if a double knot is maseh uman or not, but the concept of changing your mind to leave it forever, there are those that obviously don't allow it, even though that when you did it, you had in mind your intention wasn't for that, and there are others that allow it, and technically, if you want to be meked, you can be meked for something like this. Yeah, so if you change your mind, if you want to change your mind in regards to a knot that you already made, it could be allowed. We just spoke about um, a double knot. Okay, so technically speaking, if we ask most people, right, most people will tell you that a double knot is not is not a um, is not an expert knot, meaning it doesn't take an expert to make a double knot. Okay, even though even though your intention is not to also your intention is not to make it to last for a long time, especially when you're with your shoes. Most of the time, again, when you're making a double knot, that it's not to leave it for the long time. Okay, however, the Rama, the Ashkenaz opinion, says that a double knot is considered to be Maaseh Uman, and you would not be allowed to do it on Shabbat. Now, he also says that this a double knot is when you have two ends of a string and you're tying them. Like, for example, a shoelace, right? You have a shoelace, you're making a double knot with two strings, that would be a sul. If you were to do one knot, then there would be absolutely no problem, according to all opinions. Another thing that the Rama is strict about, and he says is also going to be considered to be a sul, is if you're making a knot on a single with a single end. Okay, so it means you have one end of a string, and on the top of the end of the string you want to make a knot, meaning you make a simple knot. You put the string in through itself. For example, you want to tie a fishing hook. Okay, so you put the end of the string through the hook and then you tie it on itself. Even if you're going to only do one knot on that, that says the Lama is going to be considered to be a Maaseh Uman, and you would not be allowed to do so on Shabbat. Um, However, the Sephardic opinion is that even though you shouldn't do it, okay, you shouldn't do it, but if you did it, it's all right. Okay, so the Sephardic opinion, and obviously respecting the fact that you're not planning to do it for a long time. Okay. Um,
Sorry,
Even there are yes.
we allowed to attach our shoes on Shabbat or not? Try to understand. To tie.
So yes. So again, so for sure to make a knot, and then a bow on top of the knot, that is for sure not a problem. We're gonna see that a little bit more, Bezat Hashem.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, when we were saying that according to the Rama, according to the Ashkenazim, that you shouldn't do a double knot because we're afraid that it's called Maseh Uman, it's called a craftsman knot. However, if there is tzal, if there's like distress, pain, if it's if it really bothers, you would be allowed to either tie it, or the same thing applies to the untying. Meaning, we're going to see that every every knot that you have a problem tying, you have the same problem to untie it. Okay. Um, so, for example, you just gave the example of tying your shoes. If a person's shoelaces are always becoming undone, and they know, like, they walk for 5 minutes, the shoelace becomes undone, and it's really bothersome to always have to bend down and to tie it, you would be allowed to make that double knot on Shabbat in that case. Okay, and the same thing applies if it's really it's really bothersome, and you want to untie it so that you can take out your shoe easier. You can also do it like that. Okay, and this is what we were saying, that there's a difference between the Rabbanan and the Deoraita, because since over here you have only one of the two conditions, meaning according to the Rama says that this is called Maaseh Uman. It's not Kesher Shel Kayama, because you're not planning to have it for more than 24 hours or 7 days. Therefore, since it's the Rabbanan and it really, really bothers you, you would be allowed to tie it or to untie it in this case. Okay. Now, in the event that you're not able to do a knot, okay, so you would be allowed to like tie it onto itself. So you wrap it around, and then you you stick it into itself, kind of holding it together. That would be allowed. Another thing that is allowed, we said, um, is a bow. Okay, if you're going to be making a bow, that's also, there's absolutely no problem with that, because a bow is not considered to be a knot. Okay, even if you have one knot before Shabbat and you want to add on to it on Shabbat, so it's already tied. You're saying it's fine, it's tied already, and you want to add on another tie or knot, or to tighten it, you would not be allowed to do so on Shabbat. So the common example that they give is, I know this is not so relevant for women, but if you have, for example, tzitzit, right? You have a tzitzit, you need a double knot on the top, and you see one of the knots are loose, you would not be allowed to tighten it on Shabbat. Okay. If a person has like a double knot that they tied throughout the week.
Yeah, like so
Okay.
like bread. You buy a bread, and the bread, sometimes when you buy it on a store, they have like attached with two balls. Or any like you get a gift like a cookie that's attached with a ring. Yeah, yeah. So no, but I'm saying the type to open the cashier. Yeah, like
Very good. So
the-
it's kind of like a shoe. Yeah, exactly. When you have something like that, it's not a it's not meant to be a permanent knot. It's never meant to be a permanent knot, and therefore you would be allowed to untie such a knot on Shabbat. Okay, so if you had a double knot that was made before Shabbat, you would be allowed to open it on Shabbat, and especially in the example that you gave, since this is the way that you're able to get to the food, that the only way that you can get to the food, so then you're allowed to do something like that. Okay.
sometimes even on a necklace, when you have a necklace, sometimes there is a tie. The necklace go, Tango. And then you have like a little, a how is it, like a
Yeah,
little,
a knot.
and I want to open it. It takes so much time sometimes just to open it even a regular day. But we're allowed to do it on Shabbat.
Um,
Ça nœud en fait qui est part of the necklace. Like
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
it happened to me sometimes.
Yes, yes. You're able to untie something like this on Shabbat, because once again, the knot is never is a knot like that is never supposed to be permanent, and it's not also considered to be Maaseh Uman. Okay, so you would be allowed you would be allowed to untie that on Shabbat.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, like we said, there's no problem to also to do a knot and a bow on top. So like the standard way to tie a shoe, right? We take the two ends, we make one knot, and on top of that we make a bow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
even though that's technically you might think it's considered to be two knots, but the bow itself is never considered to be a knot. And therefore you would be allowed to do something like that on Shabbat without any problems according to without any problem. Okay.
And if it's two knots, but very loose, one above the other,
So again, like we said, if it's necessary and it's bothersome, so then you can you can. Otherwise, you should avoid it. Now,
let's
even
say
an
garbage bag. Sometimes when I want to attach a garbage bag,
so very good. A garbage bag,
one
a
above the
garbage bag, you shouldn't generally you
Listen.
shouldn't tie it.
Yes,
Okay. The reason why you shouldn't tie a garbage bag is because a garbage bag, when you do it, it's meant to last. Okay. Other opinions say that it's
Yeah, not fun because you're doing it and then you're throwing it, so you're doing it to last.
But
It's
they,
not like you do it for your shoe and then you open it during the day.
Yeah, but if you do one, when you throw it, it's gonna lose. It's gonna
You
open
just
anyway.
take it.
no, she said they're not one.
so very good. So there are those that allow it because since
Open, because one opens,
But she said not even one. Nothing. You need to put it like this in the garbage.
open.
You hold it.
You tie it like that, but you don't do enough. But the rabbi can explain.
Yeah.
so
thank-
again,
Okay.
the reason why people say that you shouldn't do it is because the garbage bag, you're never going to untie it, right? There are those that are lenient with it because they say that the whole thing is meant for the garbage. It's not meant to really do anything with it. You're throwing it out. So there are those that are lenient, but at the end of the day, if you think of it, you think that you really like the knot is going to last. The knot is going to stay a knot, and therefore you shouldn't be doing it. Even to the point where for example, shoelaces, right? We were saying that if you make a knot and you make a bow on top of it, there's no problem with that. However, there are opinions that say that if you're going to do that type of knot, okay, and that knot is you're planning to leave that knot for a long time, you should not, even such a knot you shouldn't be doing on Shabbat, even though it's not considered to be a knot. When you put the bow on top, when you make the bow is not considered to be a knot. But if your intention is to leave it for a long time, like for example, you have people that they tie their shoes and then they never untie their shoes until it becomes undone by themselves. So they have special Shabbat shoes, let's say. They put on their Shabbat shoes, they put it on, and they see that the knot became undone. So what do? They tie their knot and they leave it there till who knows when, till the next time it's going to become undone. That there are opinions that are strict with it, even if it's just a bow on the top. Okay.
So they just must to untie it.
Yeah, so that's it. So if a person does something like that, you should make sure to untie it. You should make sure to untie it on Shabbat. Okay, so that it shouldn't last for more than 24 hours, or at least not more than 7 days. Now, what we said about tying is only if you're making a knot first. If you're only going to do the bow, okay, then there's absolutely no problem with it. Okay, because a bow is not considered to be a knot and it's not considered to be any form of tying. Therefore, it would be okay. Okay.
For example, with the garbage, I live in the 9th floor. You know, when I throw it, by the time it arrives downstairs, it's, splash.
But maybe a garbage is not muktzeh. Garbage is not muktzeh.
No. So again, if you have a full garbage, you are allowed to take it out, meaning we're not going to require you to leave it in the garbage and have your garbage overflowing, and then your kitchen is all dirty and all messy and all that. You're allowed to remove it at that point. Once you're removing it, we allow you to also move it to the the garbage bin. Okay, we don't require the garbage to sit in your house either. Okay, so when you're taking it, once you remove it from the bin, you would be allowed to take it straight to the garbage can. Now, in the event that like you're saying, that if you leave it down and everything is gonna move all over, so the simple solution for that is don't take out the garbage before it's full. Meaning, don't wait till the bag is completely full before you take it out. Make sure that there is space. Make sure that it's not completely full. And then when you're gonna just pull the strings and tighten the strings, you can easily take it out, and it's gonna stay in place. It's not gonna spread out all over. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
no problem. Okay, so when we were talking about the shoelaces, so you would be allowed, like what we said, you would be allowed to do a double knot if it bothers. The same thing applies also to the head covering. In French we say foulard, in Hebrew it's kisui rosh, right? You would be allowed to even do 2 knots on Shabbat in order to hold it in place. And like what we said, you just make sure that you undo it and you don't just slip it off of your head and leave the knot there. Okay. To, like we said, to make a tie, to make a bow, to make a tie knot on Shabbat, right? All these things are considered just like, they're not even considered knots. Sorry. So you would be allowed to do them on Shabbat. Okay, even if you're planning to leave it for a while. If a person has, I don't know how it's called, stuffed chicken in English, right? Poulet farci, and the meat, stuffed meat, or whatever it is that they take. You fill up the chicken with, meat, and then you sew it together. You are allowed to undo this knot on Shabbat. You're allowed to cut it open, because again, this is the only way that you're going to be able to get to the food. And the knot that is being made is not being made to last. It's being made to, obviously, to undo when you're going to eat it. So there's no problem with that. Another thing that you could use easily on Shabbat is a tie wrap. Okay, you would be allowed to use a tie wrap on Shabbat, because again, the tie wrap itself is not a knot. All it's doing is holding two things together. Okay, so you would be allowed to use it on Shabbat.
What is tie wrap? We don't know.
Sorry, a tie wrap is it's a piece of, usually it's a plastic, it's like a plastic thread. Okay, and not even a thread, sorry. So it's like about, well, you have different sizes, and then what you do is you take one end of it and you put it into the other end and you tighten. Okay, and it basically holds things together. So a lot of times people ask me, can they use this for the sukkah, where they want to hold the schach to the place? So there's like that plastic thing that you put in, into the other end. Like the other end has a small square. Okay, there's a small square on the end, and then you put the other end inside that square, and when you pull it through, you can't pull it out. There's a small piece of plastic that blocks it from coming out. Okay, that's a tie wrap. So you would be allowed to use that on Shabbat, even though it holds.
Are you allowed to?
Yeah, you would be allowed to use it on Shabbat, even though it's even though it's like it's
What-
almost like tying,
Houses.
but it's not a knot. And holding two things together on Shabbat is not a sul, it's the making of a knot that is a sul. So for the same reason, if you were to want to untie or even to tie in a way, like you have the metal the metal wire that's on a champagne bottle, right? You want to untie that, you want to untwist that bottle, or you want to use, there's like the bread that usually comes, it comes with like a small metal wire, right? That they use to hold the bread in the hold to hold the bread in place, like the thing that they have on top of the bag of pita, right? On top of the bag of pita, it's a small white metal wire with covered in like a sort of uh, material or whatever it is, and you use it to hold it in place. You would be allowed to use this on Shabbat without a problem, because again, you're not tying it. You're twisting it in place. You're untwisting it. It's not a problem. Okay.
If I can ask,
Yes.
I don't know how to describe it without showing it, but when you do a tie, that you take the plastic and you hold it and you tie one time, you know this, example, let's say if I'm taking this, I'm just trying to show. Because sometimes when you have a plastic bag,
Okay.
no, but I need to have, yep. Let's say
Okay.
this is a plastic bag. Okay, so I'm taking it like this, and I do just like,
To save it,
Yeah.
to store it.
and this is my plastic.
Okay. Very good. So if you're gonna pull the end completely through, then you might get into a problem if it's meant to last a long time, because that's what we said, that's called making a knot with one string. And if you make a knot with one string, we said according to the Lama, it's a problem. However, if like what you just described, where you're leaving the end of the string hanging out, where in order to undo that knot, all you have to do is you simply pull the end, and then the whole knot becomes undone. That's called, that fits under the category of aniva, a bow, and that's not considered a knot, even if you're planning it to stay for a while.
But we need to untie it on Shabbat, yeah?
No, again, if you're making a bow, you don't need to untie it on Shabbat.
Okay.
Because such a knot, and again, that would also be a possible solution if you want to use for the garbage bag. If you want to use for the garbage bag, you would be allowed to do such a knot, because that's not considered to be a knot. So again, you're taking that string, for example, I have a string here, right? You're taking the string and you're leaving the end of the string hanging out. Okay, so you're leaving the end of the string hanging out, and in order to undo it, all you do is pull the end of the string and the knot becomes undone. That is not a problem.
I got
Okay,
it, yeah,
that's considered a bow. Okay,
okay.
I'm assuming that's what you were referring to, right?
As rather than you take the bag and you just one.
Okay.
You touch just one.
Yeah, you tie it like that, all right,
Oh,
and
you
then
did that. No,
the
I don't
end is
think it's a good idea.
the
Okay.
end stays out. So you're able to do a knot like that, and it's not even considered a knot, so you don't have to undo it. You wouldn't have to undo it on Shabbat.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
So the same thing applies also for safety pins. Okay, safety pin it also fits under the same category, because you're not tying anything. You're just holding two ends together. You would be allowed to use that. You would be you would be allowed to use that on Shabbat. In general, a person should be careful with balloons on Shabbat. The reason why is because very often when you blow up a balloon without realizing it, you end up tying the knot. So you should be careful with it. But if you're not, the blowing up the balloon itself isn't the problem. It's the tying it's the tying of the knot that is the problem. So if, for example, you have a balloon that you know that you're blowing and you're unblowing it, for example, you already blew up the balloon before Shabbat and you left it like that, then you would be allowed to re-blow it up on Shabbat, of course, making sure that you don't tie it again. We said we were talking about in the beginning of the class how you're not allowed to untie any knot that you tied on Shabbat. Well, that you're not allowed to tie. Okay, so any knot that you're not allowed to tie, you're not allowed to undo. Now, another difference between the knot that is derabanan and deoraita is that if the knot is only asumi derabanan, then if you're untying it for a mitzvah, you would be allowed to untie it. If not, then no. Okay. Another halacha that comes up with this is, let's say if a person by mistake they tied a knot on Shabbat. Okay, so by mistake they tied a knot on Shabbat. They realized that they did something asul, and I was asked this question: should they now untie the knot to make it as if they didn't do the knot? Right? And the answer for that is no, because just because a person did one isul of tying a knot doesn't mean that they should now do a second isul of untying the knot, which is a separate isul. So it's important to know that if a person tied a knot, okay, it's asul. A person did a mistake, just don't untie it, because then it's going to be a second isul chas v'shalom. All right. Okay. So, any questions? No. So we'll stop here, Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
With pleasure, Be'atzlacha, Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you very much.
Désolée pour avoir fait des allers-retours avec les horaires.